I spent 30 years as a federal investigator. I've seen enough classified files to know that most conspiracies are just smoke. But this one was different. This one had roots. This is the story of the Silent Fields incident. The official report says it was a crop failure, a localized blight. But I have the satellite photos. They don't show what was there. They show what wasn't, and what wasn't there was sound. It started in the fall of 2003 in a small, isolated farming town called Oakhaven, Nebraska, a place with more corn than people. The first call wasn't a 911 emergency. It was a welfare check. A school teacher hadn't shown up for work. The local sheriff drove out to her farmhouse. And what he found, well, it broke him. The family was there. The teacher, her husband, their 2 kids. They were all just sitting in the living room, alive, breathing. Their eyes were open, but they were empty. Utterly, completely blank. They didn't respond to their names. They didn't flinch when the sheriff waved a hand in front of their faces. They were like statues made of flesh. I was sent in as a consultant from the regional office. When I got there, the first thing I noticed wasn't the family. It was the quiet. Oakhaven was surrounded by thousands of acres of cornfields, and those fields were dead silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves in the wind, no birds. It was an absolute unnatural vacuum of sound. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Within 12 hours, the town was locked down. But it wasn't the CDC that showed up. It was men in unmarked black vans, wearing sterile white hazmat suits with no insignias. FEMA set up a 5-mile perimeter. The official story hit the newswire. A new, aggressive agricultural pesticide had contaminated the town's water supply, causing temporary neurological damage. They called it environmental catatonia. It was a clean, believable lie. But I knew it was a lie. The response was too fast, too efficient. They weren't here to help. They were here to contain. My boss called me and told me to hand over my notes and get out. The matter was now a national security issue. Since when is a pesticide spill a national security issue? They transferred me to a desk job in a different state. They thought I'd forget. But I couldn't forget the silence. I started digging late at night, using my old login credentials to access sealed archives. And I found it. Oakhaven wasn't the first. There was a remote village in the mountains of Oregon in 1996, a logging community. The official story was a carbon monoxide leak from an old mine. Before that, a small island fishing community off the coast of Maine in 1982. A freak algae bloom, they said. Every single time, the pattern was the same. A quiet, isolated community. A sudden, bizarre outbreak of vacant, unresponsive people. And a swift, overwhelming government response that sealed the area off from the world forever. The people in these quarantine zones were never seen or heard from again. They were ghosts. One night, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a data chip and a single-typed note that read, "They are not growing food." The chip contained one file, a heavily redacted research proposal for a program called the Ceres Initiative. It was a joint project between a biotech corporation and the Department of Defense. They had engineered a new type of grain, a crop designed to survive any climate. But that wasn't its primary function. The plant's pollen was a powerful airborne neuroagent. It didn't kill. It didn't make people sick. It simply disconnected them. It severed the pathways in the brain responsible for will, for personality, for consciousness. It left the body alive, but erased the person inside. The goal was to create the perfect weapon, a biological agent that could pacify an entire city, leaving the infrastructure and population intact for takeover. Oakhaven wasn't an accident. It was a field test. The file had one last attachment, a short, silent video clip. The timestamp was from 3 days after Oakhaven was locked down. It was shot with a high-powered zoom lens from a nearby hill, looking down into the silent cornfields. You could see the townspeople, all of them, walking in slow, single-file lines into the fields. They weren't being forced or herded. They were moving with a calm, empty purpose. And then the camera pans, and you see them. Standing between the rows of corn, perfectly still, were figures. They were tall and unnaturally thin. They weren't wearing hazmat suits. They looked like they were made of dried corn husks and shadow, their limbs long and spindly. They weren't soldiers. They weren't scientists. They just stood there, watching the vacant people walk deeper and deeper into the corn. They weren't guarding them. They were tending to them, like a farmer tends to his livestock. I leaked what I could, but it was buried instantly. I was dishonorably discharged and discredited. The official record states that the Ceres Initiative was a failure and was dismantled years ago. The silent fields of Oakhaven are now barren, fenced off, and marked as federal property. But I still check the satellite photos, and sometimes I see them. New patterns of cultivation in other forgotten corners of the world. Places where the fields are a little too green, a little too perfect. They haven't stopped. They've just gotten better at hiding it. They're not just trying to control the food supply anymore. They're cultivating people. And I can't help but wonder, what are they getting ready to harvest?